Right.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give us a bit of background about yourself, introduce us, and the people watching, who you are, how you got to where you are?
Right. So I'm from Edmond, Oklahoma. I've been making music for about 4 or 5 years professionally. I started putting it out in 2019. Um, but I started making music really back in 2017 is when I first really started kicking things off. Uh,
Nice.
but I wanted to take some time to improve before I started putting it out. Um, and yeah, I've always loved music since I was, pretty young. So I wanted to, it's kind of a therapeutic thing for me.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and who were your like influences then growing up?
So in terms of like who I listened to growing up, a
Yeah.
lot of metal, a lot
Oh,
of
cool.
rock music. Um, I didn't get into hip hop and stuff until I was a little older. Um, when by a little older, I mean like 7 or 8 years old. So yeah, I was listening to Eminem and stuff way before I probably should have been. So
Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, I like that you come from a metal
mm,
background because that's me. Like, I grew up on metalcore, stuff, and then
yeah,
transitioned to like everything else. But I was a die-hard metalhead to start with. Um, and now you're currently making, I'd say, more like hyper pop inspired
uh-huh.
stuff. So, how did you fall into kind of creating hyper pop? What inspired you to go into making that?
Well, I was really inspired by the 100 gex sound, like I mentioned, and the stuff I sent you.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to kind of do my best to replicate that sound in my own way.
Yeah. I really like 10,000 Gex. That was really good.
Yeah,
I have
that's
to say
probably that's
it's
probably the album I was referencing the most when I was working on the second side of this album we're talking about now.
yeah, I could totally hear that influence because
Yeah.
um I mean that even 10,000 Gex over 1,000 Gex, like you can hear the difference between those two albums and
Uh-huh.
you can definitely hear the inspiration in your album. So how would you typically describe the music you create? Is it mainly drawn from 100 gex or is there more?
Well, I mean, the music I put out mostly is electronic, the hip hop, R&B, house, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I actually tried to start up a band uh last year. Um, and we put out one record, and that's all we ended up doing until one guy left and couldn't find long story.
What was the name of the band? If you don't mind me asking.
Uh,
Is it on
Fajer,
Spotify?
Fajr.
Is that available on Spotify and stuff?
Yeah, the name is a play on a music term. It's because we were when we were recording a track for the record I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, my guitarist mentioned that he wasn't sure whether the chord he was playing was major or minor, so I call it a fake major, and we just mushed the two together.
Oh, I like that. Cool. So let's talk about this album, Some Guy in His Computer, Random Music Volume 3. Um, what if you could give us a brief overview of it? I know you've explained to me how it works, but if you could tell the people watching, what inspired you to make this and kind of how the order fell into place.
Right, so I was in kind of a polar opposites when it came to the music I was listening to during the making of each side. So the first side is like very Matt Villainy, 90s hip hop, lo-fi, that kind of inspiration.
Yeah.
And then the second side is more of the hyper pop stuff like you've mentioned. Uh but in terms of like the actual writing process and stuff, the first side is more about like negativity, holding grudges, having negative feelings, etc., etc.
Yeah,
And the second side is more about reconciling with such feelings and doing my best to move on and uh put the past behind me,
yeah.
and with a touch of cynicism.
Okay, I can definitely hear that. There's definitely two sides to the coin
Mhm.
in this project. Why was your headspace like that for the first half, and why did it change in the second half?
Well, because I had taken some time, taken some time away from music in between making the two sides, and I was just going through some personal stuff during the making of the first side, and it was showing up in my music for sure.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I have a problem letting things go, and that was one of the things that I wrote about mostly. Was having a problem like holding on to things that I don't need to be holding on to, you know.
Oh,
And then after taking some time away, I was like, you know, life's gonna keep going whether I wanted to or not. So might as well make the best of it and, you know, express myself in this way. And even on the second side, I mean, there's still a little twinge of that, you know, anger,
yeah,
but it's a little more subtle than, because like I mentioned to you, the lyrics of the first side are much darker and cynical,
yeah.
and the second side is much more like, okay, forget it.
Yeah, and it does really feel like that. And even in the beats, the music that is on the second side is much more happy, major. Not that
Mhm.
the first side isn't as well, but it just feels more like an upbeat kind of almost like a 100 gex party kind of
Right.
feel.
I
It's really
wanted,
good.
I really wanted to, capture that, like capture the shift in my mood in terms
Mm,
of the style of the music. I really wanted to make that clear, like this is a totally different thing,
yeah,
and like of course these two are connected, but I really wanted to make a distinction between the first side and the second side.
yeah.
Uh,
And you even got a song in the middle that's called Transition, isn't it? And it's kind of more like a sound piece more than anything. It sounds
yeah,
like there's music going on in another room, and there's like I think alarms going off and stuff. So you got that transition between the two sides, which is a nice link to
yeah.
make there.
The idea for that was like when you're going through a neighborhood and there's like music playing through a car, and you hear only the low end,
Yeah,
coming from the trunk of the car,
it
and there
definitely
might
did
be
sound
some
like
like,
I was
yeah.
outside somewhere. Yeah, yeah, it worked really well. So you've got these two sides, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Hmm.
Um, but the album wasn't intended to be an album. You just had like a mix of songs, but then
Well,
eventually it did.
so like that that was the first idea, like,
Mm,
and in the first round of music, that was the initial idea, was to just like have an album of tracks that weren't really supposed to have any sort of theme in mind. They were just kind of what I was feeling, what I was like making at the time. But like with the second one and this most recent one, I feel like there was a little bit more of a theme. I had a friend that I was talking to about it some time ago when Random Two released, and he said, um, Random Two is like your My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and Random One is like I compared it to like different Batmans. And so I said that Random One was like the 1980s Batman, and Random Two was like Dark Knight level of Batman.
Yeah,
Christian Bale.
that's very
I'm not
that's a
I'm
good
not really
analogy.
sure I'm not really sure what Random 3 would be in terms of personifying it. But it's kind of two different things. Maybe Two Face.
Yeah. Two-Face would probably work quite well actually with that, yeah.
Uh,
So it because of the way the genre is hyperpop, um, and even the album itself is called Some Guy and His Computer. How much like processing and effects has to go on into making it? Because I've looked into making hyperpop because I love the sound of it,
yeah,
and there's quite a lot you kind of need to do messing around with things
yeah.
to get that sound. So how
It's
how do you do it?
it's quite a lot more difficult. Like in doing research and listening to a bunch of different stuff in the genre. Kind of before I dove into the second side. Like there's a lot of uh like misconceived things, like um the amount of grit, for lack of a better, the amount of grit that you have to get while keeping a mix clean.
Yeah,
It's a really tricky, like you have to sort of find a balance uh between the distorted sound and the clean compressed sound.
yeah. And then there's also
Um,
like almost like a lack of reverb in a lot of the instrumentation. Um,
yeah, everything is kind of in your face. There's
yeah.
not a lot of there's not a lot of space.
No,
Uh,
it's very
in
there, isn't it?
hyperpop, it's uh very condensed.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm more fascinated and interested to find out about is what you do to the vocals because like I have Logic Pro and I know how to do a pitch shifting or formant
Uh-huh.
changing, but I don't know quite how to achieve those hyperpop sounds with the vocals.
Well, what I do is I started with the basic tuning, format shifting, that sort of thing,
Yeah,
and then I went to distortion and overdrive actually,
right.
just to kind of brighten it up a bit, crisp it crisp it up a little bit, and then obviously compression
Yeah.
to keep it in your face, and you know you want it to feel as close to the mic as possible. You want you want it to be like right here, like
Oh no, I can hear that very well. It's like right there. Yeah. Um
uh,
So, but
so.
yeah, that I mean that does help, and I
For,
think I just need to dive into watching some
in
videos as
fact,
well.
in fact, for most of the vocal takes on the second side, I was like right, I was here, like
Yeah,
my lips were touching the mic
I
for
mean
most of.
these microphones are great for that anyway. Like you've
Yeah.
got a pop shield surrounding your mic,
Uh.
so it's great. It's your P's and your B's you got to be careful about though, isn't it? With the
Uh-huh.
what's it called?
There's quite a bit of because of the amount of compression from the results from the distortion and stuff.
Yeah,
There's quite a lot of de-essing and just cleanup that needs to happen. I remember on most of the stuff for on the second side, I have like four different DQs on the vocal chain.
wow, wow,
I have
that's a lot.
for just like general cleanup, and then um one for boosting frequencies that were taken away, like the high ends maybe. You
Yeah,
you really don't want to boost low ends when it comes to hyper pop vocals because most of the time there's distortion or some other effect that takes up a lot of space.
yeah. And the
Sonic,
low end can give you quite a warm, warm kind of sound anyway,
yeah,
can't it? Like a warm sound that you just need to get rid
uh-huh.
of and just keep it bright.
And it's very um, if you get too much of low end, your mixes get very muddy.
Yeah,
And then there's some phase cancellation that happens too sometimes.
yeah, yeah. And I find it really hard to listen for phase. I still don't get it. I've been doing it like 15 years now, music production. I
Yeah.
still don't quite. I can hear it sometimes, but not all the time. Right. So who would be interested in this album? or like some of these songs, like who is it for? Who have you done this for?
Well, that's the thing, because I had somebody else ask me that, and I was like, well, I mean, uh, I feel like this is gonna sound kind of marketing esque, but I feel like the second side is more like, oh, here's some music you should listen to, and the first side is more more like, hey, if you're feeling these feelings too, then you should listen, that sort of thing. But the second side is focused more on making something that is like catchy and in more of a pop context, like
Yeah,
chorus verse thing, um,
yeah,
and like a lot of repetition. Uh, not a lot of super complex harmony or anything.
yeah,
But I think this first side is a little bit more. It's a little bit more difficult to like put that in a specific category because like obviously there's an influence there, but like you there's there's so much stuff happening that it's hard. I guess you could say um the first side is more for people who uh, have already kind of like this is not something this is not something you'd want to listen to like your first time with the genre, I would say, because a lot of it is really a
yeah,
lot of it is really dark
yeah.
and like
But
there
it could connect with people who are feeling
right.
like that way,
I
couldn't it?
almost feel like sometimes that sort of uh dark feeling resonates with people more because they're like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'm I'm feeling the same way. Whereas the hyperbop can sometimes feel sugary,
yeah, yeah.
like
And definitely, I agree with the second side of the project is more like catered towards just general hyperpop. If you're in a good mood, you
yeah,
want to stick on some hyperpop. That's
you're right.
that side, isn't it? But if you want to connect with an artist, that's maybe the other side. Yeah. What would you say is your favorite from the album then?
Across both sides, or
Yeah, yeah, across both sides, or you could choose one from each. Yeah.
uh, gee, well, I'm gonna since it's so divided in my mind, I'm gonna have to do one from each side. I think I would say, um, I would say my favorite from the first side is probably "Bitch Didn't Even Try," and then the second side is probably "Hands in the Shape of a V" for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite from the project is probably Hands in the Shape of a V. It's just got that kind of catchy song tune.
Right,
I was like, listen, it was still repeating in my head after hearing it. It's
right,
Hands in the Shape of a V. I was still singing it, which is a good sign, isn't it? So you definitely
right.
got your catchy stuff towards the end, but
Uh-huh.
Black Sweater as well had a catchy hook to it. So
Yeah,
you've definitely got the good hooks, the
that
marketable
was
singles.
that was sort of the idea with Black Sweaters. It was like this is this is by far the most like divergent thing. This is gonna be a silly song about a piece of clothing,
Yeah.
and it's gotta be an earworm.
Yeah, but
That was one of
I do like that. I like lyrical topics that are just about something, some small topic that's original and different. So just talking about your sweater, that's brilliant.
right. Um, yeah, but like I said, that was one of the goals with that song. Is just create something that gets jammed into your head,
Yeah, yeah, and it worked, and it worked, it worked.
whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, that's the good thing about hyperpop is sometimes it really can get in your ear, can't it?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Even like the stuff that's darker lyrically.
yeah,
that can get in your head too.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely can, and there's definitely ones at the start that do that too. I still have days where like "Frog on the Floor" by 100 Gex just pops into my
Yeah.
head like all the time. That's such a catchy song, isn't it? So
Uh-huh.
earworms are great because that you can market that to many people, and then they'll come and find like the true you when they go
Right.
to your albums. Um,
Uh-huh.
so if you could give people a reason to listen to your music, what would you say? What makes it unique from others?
Well, one thing I would say is like I'm a big advocate of like independency and authenticity. So, um, my whole thing is like people have approached me and be like, "Oh, so you want to stay? Your goal is to stay independent and not sign with like a major label." I say, if I can make that happen, then yeah. I mean, um, then again, I'm sort of against the idea of when somebody signs with a record label, they immediately call like a sellout or a
Yeah,
something of that nature. Cause
it's not
like
fair, is it?
right,
Yeah, and signing anyway these days it doesn't get people as far. They
no.
expect a lot of work from you, and you have to make a lot of TikToks these days. They're all about how TikTokable you are, and
I feel like the problem now with signing is just the amount of oversaturation.
yeah.
Because now anybody can put out music. Anybody with a distributor and a laptop can make a song and put it on
Yeah.
onto everywhere.
Well, that's it.
Um,
There's two sides, and that's actually going to be my next question. How's the internet impacted your approach to being an artist? There's two sides to it, isn't there? Like, there's one thing that we all have access to making music, and we're hearing stuff that might never have been made.
mhm,
100 Gex, for example, might never have made Hyperpop, Charlie XCX, and others might never accessed things to do with Hyperpop if that had never happened. If they weren't given just a laptop to mess around on.
mhm,
So there's that side, but then you're right. The other side is the oversaturation. Everyone's making music. But if you also look at it, Spotify, for all its flaws,
uh-huh,
50% of its revenue last year was independent artists, and that's huge.
right.
That is huge.
But of course, like we 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 don't have time to get into the controversy. But of course, there's a matter of like independent artists not getting the money they deserve and only getting, fractions of a penny per stream and all this other stuff. And I think too, like the whole idea of the internet being oversaturated uh is what inspired the name too. Cause like amidst all the chaos, I'm still here and
Yeah.
I'm still gonna be here, no matter how things change.
Yeah, I
Um,
do like that it's called Some Guy and His Computer because that that's so many independent artists in it. We're all just some guys with computers,
uh,
just making stuff, trying to be heard, and that's
mhm.
all it is. I mean, I started this YouTube just so I could get people to listen to my music. I thought if I
Right.
listen to independent artists, they might listen to me. So we're all just trying to be heard in this vast ocean of artists. But
It's funny that you mentioned YouTube because when I first started YouTube, I was one of those, beat channels where I would just upload beats for rappers to buy if they wanted to.
yeah.
Uh, but then after several months, maybe a year of not getting more than two or three sales a month, I was like, why do I need to bother with other rappers when I could just do
Just do it yourself. Yeah.
when I could just do vocals myself? And there was a there used to be a pretty big confidence issue with vocals, but I feel like the more I've done it, um, better I've gotten at it, and I feel like that's most apparent with this most recent album.
And I think hyperpop works well for the vocals as well, and it's a great way to like use the voice, isn't it? Uh,
Especially if you want like um simplicity and not a lot of words. Like you just have to worry with hyperpop specifically. You just have to worry about writing a melody that's gonna stick with people,
Yeah.
uh, and you know once you have that, you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
I
Like you
would
don't have
say.
to understand it, but if the melody's nice, it works, doesn't it?
Right.
And yeah, I think you definitely got that. But then looking into your lyrics, like the lyrical writing that you're doing is pretty good. Like it's quite deep, it's profound, even on the back half of the album, where it's more fun. There's clever writing within it, so it's not like you're just coming up with whatever. You've got
Right.
good ideas there. So yeah, I was quite blown away by the lyrical content that you were creating.
And my writing process is a little bit unorthodox. Sometimes, um, so I because I normally start with an instrumental of some sort,
Yeah,
and then I'll go in and I'll just pull up to the mic and be like, okay, what what sort of mood does this give off? What what's on my mind right now that I can just spew out.
well,
And most of the time, especially with some of the um not so much the first half because the first half is much more personal and like there's a lot more deep thought in those lyrics, but on the second side, some of the lyrics I just recorded and then wrote down afterwards.
nice.
Like there was no there was no sitting down with a pen and paper or a notes app being like, okay, what's the next line gonna be here? It was all just like from up here to the DAW.
That's
So
nice. I mean, so I work that way sometimes as well, and that kind of just consciousness, like dribble, just feeding it in, it can work really well. So yeah.
and
Um,
sometimes it doesn't work.
no, well, you know when it doesn't, and you know when it does, though, don't
Right.
you? Yeah. So right, I've got one last question for you, which is, what is next for you? What are you planning to do next?
Well, I am I am working on Random 4 already, but I'm trying to take it slow. So
Mm,
like with the previous versions or volumes, I kind of just did it all in one sitting and like record a song, mix a song, so on and so on. But
yeah,
with this new album I'm working on, I'm trying to divide it up a little bit more. So
right.
what I'm doing is like more of the band approach. It's like I'm recording everything and then worrying about the mix later.
That's a good idea. That was a good idea. And it's good to take your time. I'm usually
Right,
super fast. Like I've just made this, I want to share it with the world. And sometimes you do need to slow down, take your time, come back to it
right.
later and just check it.
And
Yeah. So
honestly, that was sort of the case with this album too. Is like by the end of the second side, I was like, okay, the album's done. It's ready to be put out. People are gonna like it. Best album ever. Those sort of thoughts. Um, but even now, looking back, I'm like, I feel like that's the case with a lot of artists. Like, oh, the mix could be better,
yeah,
or the vocals need to be redone, or that sort of thing. Even
yeah,
I feel like that analogy is best expressed with like paint, because like, oh, that color needs to be a little brighter or darker
yeah.
or something.
You could spend your whole life over analyzing what you've made and wishing you'd done stuff differently, but uh, it is what it is, and it'll be things that people don't notice that you'll be
Hmm.
worried about, you know. So um,
But I feel like with with this album especially, it was more about um, it was more about the raw experiences of what I was going through at the time,
yeah,
rather than producing the most clean, perfect album you've ever heard in your life. I mean, there's some imperfections on Scener. I was going through the vocals and on Scener there was somebody in the chorus. I think there's somebody talking in the background because I have my door open and somebody like the compressor brings out everything,
I
so
didn't
you can
notice.
hear some. Like,
I don't think I noticed that. So yeah, that's it. We worry about things that maybe people won't spot, but if I had another two or three listens, I'd probably spot the same thing.
right.
But yeah, you can get so bogged down in the nitty gritty. But it's nice to have, especially with hyperpop,
Mhm.
stuff that isn't the most well produced stuff out there. It's raw, it's original, it sounds different, and I guess that's the whole point of it, isn't it? So
Right.
yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that side of things, definitely. Well, it's been lovely speaking to you.
Yeah, you too.
And some guy on
I
his
enjoy.
computer, you can go and check out my reaction to it, guys. It's linked in the description down below. Go and check out Some Guy in His Computer Random Music Volume 3 by Logan Hobart. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. And now it feels so good to say hello, hello, good morning, hello, 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 good day, hello. And now it feels so right to say I miss you, I love you, and God, it feels so good to say hello. God, it feels so good to say hello.
Bye, ladies and gentlemen.